How did a once introverted programmer go from coding in a cubicle to leading an iconic American brand? Well, that's exactly what Omaha Steaks CEO Nate Rempe did. And along with CEO Forum Group founder Robert Reiss, they're your inside source for magical hacks that will transform the way you command a room, command your career, and maybe even command a company. Get ready. This is Brain of Command.
Hi, welcome back to Brain of Command. And today's topic is the fast CPU. Now, so you know, I somehow have one of the slowest CPUs of anyone I've ever met. I have to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and my goal was always to get more done by 9 than anyone who works a full day. But it's just out of outworking people. But Nate, talk about what this is, and then you're going to hear who our guest is, who is one of the top, perhaps the top, authorities on how the brain works in business.
We have a great show for you today. Robert, you mentioned it there, right? I mean, everybody is built with different speeds of CPU, quote unquote, which proverbially is their brain. And, you know, you mentioned getting up at 4 o'clock and kind of overcoming that by working harder, by leaning in and being willing to spend that time to overcome maybe biologic constraints you have. So that's really what we want to talk about today. Thinking back when I was younger, you know, I would actually build PCs. And, you know, if the CPU was too slow, you could crack open the case, pull out the CPU, install a new one into the motherboard, and, you know, boom, you're up and running with a faster machine. Well, we can't very much crack our heads open and install a new brain, at least not yet, right? So what we wanted to cover today is if you're a person that has, call it a slower CPU, you can still be extremely effective and extremely successful by leveraging different tips and tricks. And by the way, if you're someone with a fast CPU, you also have to be cognizant of how that affects your leadership and affects how you deal with others. So I'll pass it back to you, Robert, and you can introduce our awesome guest today.
Okay, our guest is Dr. David Rock, and there's a term called NeuroLeadership, which ties in the brain into business. He coined that term. He is the founder and CEO of the NeuroLeadership Institute. He personally advises 2/3 of the Fortune 100 companies. He has 4 books. One that I absolutely loved, you should read, is Your Brain at Work. And he's all over Harvard Business Review, all over everything like that. But we're going to welcome David Rock. And David, give a quick tie-in in how the brain works. And then I want to throw you, like maybe give a case study, like, for example, Microsoft, because he is a beloved CEO. So all yours, David.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And thanks so much for having me, and a pleasure to talk with you about this, Robert and Nate. Firstly, let me just sort of give you a high-level reflection response to the topic, and then maybe I'll share a little bit about Microsoft and some of the things we do. But the concept of a sort of speed of a CPU is really interesting. And I was thinking about a good parallel might be like how fast a car engine can spin, like how fast, you know, how many RPMs can you get from an engine? If you've got a fast spinning engine, that's fantastic. But if you have no brakes, you're in a whole lot of trouble. If you have a terrible starter, you're in a whole lot of trouble. And if you have, you know, terrible exhaust systems, you're in a whole lot of trouble. So it's a piece of the puzzle. And it actually, depending on kind of the whole system, it can be a fantastic asset or a real problem. And basically, in the brain, it correlates to a concept loosely called clock speed, which is like a hertz, you know, like Hz, right? It's how quickly your brain processes. And we do actually have really different speeds that we process. But, you know, going back to the car metaphor, the speed of processing is one important variable, but actually can be amazing or problematic depending how you use it. And depending on several other variables, but it is highly variable. And you do see a lot of the uber successful people, you know, whether it's, you know, Elon Musk or, you know, Steve Jobs or, you know, the founder of Microsoft, right, Bill Gates. These people are often renowned at being able to process enormous amounts of complex information very quickly. And so there is a bit of a strategic advantage in business if you use it right in having incredibly fast clock speed. But it also depends how you use it. So that's the sort of, you know, big picture. And then we can dive into that. You know, as to the work we do with organizations, we essentially create smarter leaders. And the way we create smarter leaders is we give them a richer language for what happens in the human brain when they're leading. So we're not assessing if they have a healthy brain or not. We're not testing that. We're not predicting leadership success. We're giving them this much richer language of what happens when you lead people moment to moment in your brain and other people's brains. And through this language, people become much more adaptive. Right? They actually can see in real time what's going on when they're trying to motivate, trying to calm down, trying to influence, trying to hire, trying to fire, like all the different tasks. You actually have this much greater access to what's really happening, and it gives you a lot more power in that way. So we're basically building a new language for leadership. And what this does, it makes leaders, smarter. So somewhere like Microsoft, all our work goes into the majority of their somewhere in their people program. So they teach about the brain and leadership, right from the start in their learning pipeline. When you become a leader, you learn a lot more. Different programs look at it from many other angles. They're one of our deepest partnerships. We essentially built their definition of leaders, how they develop those leaders, and then gave them this language so that everyone understood the brain more. And I would like to say that that's been the reason for their success in the last decade, but there's many, many other factors. But certainly they turned around from a very non-innovative organization to a very, one of the most innovative organizations. Right. And that was actually one of the goals of all the work that we did with them.
A friend of mine who's a orthopedic surgeon here in Nebraska, when he was going to medical school, decided that he was not going to get an MD, that he was going to get a DO. And you see that more often now because in medicine today, it's really about the whole person. It's not just about the shoulder or the knee. It's how do you recover 100%. And so can you take that and talk about how NeuroLeadership Institute helps people recognize, hey, you might not have the Ferrari engine in your head. Maybe you got a Volvo, but Volvos are reliable and safe and fuel efficient and very popular with families, for example. So like take that and help our listeners, kind of calibrate where they might be at on that spectrum and how they can be successful despite a slow or fast CPU.
Absolutely. I was just in Sweden for some work recently over the summer, and there are Volvos everywhere, and including from like the 70s and the 80s. They're still right. So, they're clearly doing something right. So one of the really fascinating things about the brain, and this is kind of like the first half almost of my most recent book, which is called Your Brain at Work. And this is sort of one of the really interesting conundrums. Everyone thinks that they have this incredible unlimited capacity in their brain, that they're only using, 10% of their brain. And basically when people hear this, they feel very guilty and very ashamed that that's not their experience, that they basically feel completely overwhelmed and can hardly remember anything they want to, and find that by 11 a.m. their decision making has sort of collapsed in a heap, right? And so we've been told we have this incredible capacity, and it turns out that capacity is only there for things we do unconsciously that we've sort of learned how to do without thinking. And driving, riding a bike, playing piano, things that we learn and we push into our motor cortex, we have incredible capacity. But when it comes to conscious decision making using this network called the prefrontal cortex, like when it comes to actually, making a decision, we have incredible limitations. And this is why AI is growing and everyone's excited, because, humans can barely add up 4 digits in their head or find a pattern across 5 variables. Impossible, right? Technology can do incredible things. So we have this, we've been told we have unlimited capacity. It turns out that's only true for things that are in the unconscious, that in the conscious world, we have actually incredible limits to our capacity. And the irony is that you become much, much, much smarter, more effective, better decision maker, better leader when you respect those limits and you work around them.
I love that.
Right? And that's actually one of the key messages of what I found in the research, is that particularly the prefrontal cortex has tremendous limitations, and you learn to work around them. Now, if you have amazing clock speed, you actually often, one of the things you have to learn is actually how to slow down, because a lot of people who don't have that clock speed just don't keep up, get annoyed, feel offended, all sorts of things. So that's a quick example, but overall, the message from neuroscience is when it comes to particularly leadership tasks, you actually need to really understand the limitations and work out how to work around them. That's the cliff note.
So spot on. Great message.
We're about to take a break. When we come back, we're going to ask for specific advice. Someone, if you have a slow brain, what do you do in business? Super fast. And David, Dr. Rock, is going to give us specific advice on that. By the way, what is the website to NeuroLeadership Institute, if anyone wants to go there?
Yeah, NeuroLeadership.com, just NEURO leadership, NeuroLeadership.com. There's lots and lots there, amazing array of blogs and podcasts, all sorts of things.
Right.
And a huge amount of research, too. Back in a few. We'll get back to the show in just a minute. First, though, I want to talk with you about your dinner plans. When you're a busy executive, dinner can be an afterthought. You want to know my secret to everyday perfection? Omaha Steaks. Whether you're spending time with your family or entertaining guests, Omaha Steaks makes it easy with quality and convenience you just won't find anywhere else. And every order is backed by a 100% guarantee. No planning, no prep, just handcraft, one-of-a-kind perfection that's ready when you are and shipped seriously fast to your door. That's why Omaha Steaks has been trusted by professional chefs, families across America, and executives like me for more than a century. Don't wait. Visit omahasteaks.com and discover a smarter way to shop. Plus, get $35 off with code CEO. You can remember that, CEO, at checkout. Terms apply. See site for detail. Hi, this is Robert and Nate on Brain of Command. We are talking about the fast CPU, and our guest, Dr. David Rock, is one of the world authorities, coined the term. Give one piece of advice to someone working in a corporation who has a slow CPU, one thing that they could do to make their brain work better, and maybe one piece of advice for someone fast. And then we may skip in a little later on into how AI ties into the brain. All yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. Let me sort of work around the question a bit and then maybe answer it directly. But one of the interesting things, if you're either a senior leader now or working your way up, the interesting phenomena is that early in your career, you're kind of rewarded for clock speed, for rapid decision making, for kind of, coming up with great answers to solutions, right? So IQ, clock speed, these kinds of things will really help you early on in your career. But the more you go up in an organization, the less it's actually about you making decisions all day long. And it's actually about your human skills. And it becomes much more about your ability to understand, motivate, and develop other people, right? Both individually, team, and at scale. And so the ability to understand, motivate, and develop other humans actually is in a bit of a seesaw to the network in the brain for making rational decisions. And if you've spent your whole career making just rational decisions, you may not have spent much time really on those other skills. They're completely different networks in the brain that are like a seesaw. So as you're becoming as you're going up the ladder, whether you've got a fast CPU or slow CPU, you actually need to really work on your human skills, in particular, just like really understanding what motivates people, understanding their goals, working out how to motivate people, also how to redirect people all sorts of ways, right? How to deal with strong emotions, how to grow and develop people. So these kinds of things are really critical. And they're a different network in the brain than clock speed, although your ability to think quickly about that stuff will help. But it's actually a whole different process. There's a technique called mentalizing. There's a process called perspective taking. These processes are really different to the general kind of decision-making process. So that's one broad thing. It's something to really, really work on and build. We actually did an analysis of competencies across thousands, I think more than 10,000 leaders by a professional assessment firm. And we looked at the percentage of people who are very, very good at that rational decision-making. And then we looked at the people who are very good at the people side of things. And we found less than 2% of leaders were actually really strong in both. And those were often the unicorn. So that's, and that's kind of why leadership development exists in a large way, that people need that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, one of the most important capacities as you develop as a leader is, again, not so much clock speed, but actually the brakes, going back to the car. It's actually self-regulation, which includes kind of, holding your tongue, not saying something you shouldn't, writing that email and saving it and not sending it, right? To de-escalate something. When you don't take offense, at other people's attack, right? When you ignore people who don't believe you don't believe your vision, and you just go forward anyway. These are all examples of self-regulation capacity. And there's a particular network in the brain, again, nothing to do with the clock speed. This network's the right and left ventrolateral prefrontal. It's called the brain's braking system. And this ability to stay cool under pressure, under increasing pressure, and it really does go up and up and up. The implications of bad decisions go up and up and up. So this capacity to stay cool under pressure is a really, really critical leadership capacity. And working on that, like being the best in class at that, it almost doesn't matter how fast your clock speed is. You can stay cool under pressure in any situation. So those are two things. So we think about capacity, which is kind of clock speed. But social cognition and self-regulation are probably much more important as you go up in the organization as skills to really work on. Almost doesn't matter what your capacity is and speed otherwise.
So if we talked about hard skills and soft skills, so let's just say hard skills being mathematics, cognition, the ability to understand a concept and process it, versus the soft skills, which would be the human element. Trying to ram hard skills to overcome the lack of soft skills. I've seen it 100 times. I mean, even in myself, as I was coming up in a C-level role, just not patient. My brain would tell me the answer. I didn't want to wait around for other people to get there. I had tried to ram that through, and I couldn't get my organization behind me as a leader. Take the audience through that process.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that. It's very vulnerable. That's a combination of poor social cognition and poor self-regulation, right? So it's a combination of not really reading the room, which is
right.
Social cognition. You're not really reading where people are, what would motivate them, what would demotivate them, and you're just in your head, right? So you're not able to put their heads in your head, which is called, perspective taking. That's the category of social cognition. And then the self-regulation, you're not able to just be patient and pause, and you just want to go and go and go. And it could be really hard for some very, very smart people to deal with that. I remember working with Sarah Matthews at the time. She was the CEO of Dun & Bradstreet.
Dun & Bradstreet, yeah.
Yep. And she read some of my work, and I went out and saw her, and we had this big conversation about what happens in other people's brains when she's the smartest person in the room and when she solves all the problems. And she suddenly understood she was creating a status threat in everyone else. And she had this big insight about the way she accidentally literally drops everyone's IQ by solving all the problems faster than they can. And she changed her entire leadership style from these conversations and some research we shared. And the next year, she went on to be the highest value-generating CEO in the Fortune 500. She won an award for that. So it's what she did was she built her self-regulation and her social cognition in learning to really pause and not accelerate down that path. And in this case, we taught her a framework we call the SCARF model, which is kind of just it's like the primary colors of social cognition. It tells you basically what drives people. It's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And as you learn these 5 things, you can kind of see a little bit more easily. You can see what you're about to do wrong. So that's the cliff note. Self-regulation, social cognition. Yours is a perfect example of how not building those can really get in the way as a leader.
Is AI normalizing or providing an equilibrium across the landscape of leaders? Those that are faster on the hard skills are now not able to rely as much on that. And if they're weak in the soft areas, that may be a massive disadvantage because, as you mentioned, AI isn't necessarily providing those human factors.
Yeah, you can. It can. You can, but you got to ask the right question. The trouble is, people with poor human skills don't know they have it, don't want to know they have it.
Sure.
There's a long
complete self-unawareness or just not wanting to acknowledge it.
Exactly.
Right?
But if they were aware, you could use AI to whether it's ours or others, you could use an AI to actually build your human skills. There's lots of ways to do that, but generally the worse a leader is, the fewer learning opportunities they dig into, and self-paced learning just doesn't work for.
Right. I mean, I don't think whenever I needed to leverage my soft skills, I wasn't able to go, can you hold on one moment will I go ask AI how I should respond to your crisis?
You've got a fun idea. Imagine if an organization said, look, every single leader, all the way down to frontline managers, needs to have Niles listen to a team meeting once a month, the whole hour, and
That's
then
fascinating.
give feedback, and then send that feedback into HR, right? And Niles will spot all these incredible insights about, is there really psychological safety? Are people feeling really uncomfortable? Are you being the best leader? If not, what could you work on? Like real-time data. In a very objective way. So you imagine that there's a world coming where even poor leaders are going to have to shape up and learn more.
Sure.
Organizations will see the value of this kind of system in time.
And there you have it. Thank you, Dr. Rock. Nate, this was a lot of fun. And everyone, you have learned about the fast CPU in depth. See you next time.
Thanks, Dr. Rock.
The ability to think quickly can give you a tremendous advantage. And while you can't increase the speed of your CPU, being honest with yourself about your limitations is the first step to leveraging your other strengths and overcoming any weaknesses. For more on today's hack, download the free Brain of Command companion guide at omahasteaks.com/podcast. Join us next time when we discuss the power of networking. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell your colleagues that you're hacking your career with Brain of Command.